And I mean, now the Toyota thing is just going to make it even bigger.
Here's the
I was talking to
tricky
somebody
part.
yesterday who said, so I just told this you're going to ask me
Yeah.
questions, sir. Oh, there we go.
Wow. Yeah, usually I run the questions as text, so it doesn't really matter if you can hear me.
Okay. And so just give me context there. And so you're going to ask a few questions focused on covering the beat or
Yeah.
focused on, okay.
Pretty short. A couple of fun pop culture questions.
Okay, that's fine.
But mainly, right to the business. The first question. Well, first of all, say your name and your outlet, how long you've been covering the White House.
Sure. Ed Henry, CNN, Senior White House Correspondent. I've been at CNN since 2004, so it's almost 6 years now. I was covering the Hill for about 2 and the White House now for 4. So I had about 2 years of the Bush administration, 2 years, second year, I guess, of the Obama administration now. So it was, what do I say? I guess it was 06, 07. Yeah, no, 3 years of Bush, March of 06 through the end, and then now a year and a few days. It feels like longer.
And what do you think makes you a good White House reporter?
Well, I think my good looks mostly, but no, work habits. I try to work hard at it. It's you've got to stay on top of your game because it's easy to kind of get lulled into thinking it's such an exciting beat and that you've been covering it for a while, and forget to ask the tough questions. I mean, I think I was reading a story by Howie Kurtz the other day about it wasn't really White House related per se, but it was about the reporters covering the Martha Coakley race and how immediately after her primary win, people were saying this is going to be the first, just blatantly in their stories, print stories these were, but TV can do the same, saying she's likely to be the first female senator from Massachusetts, and they were just kind of, it was just a fait accompli, and people were just, I think there was one article in particular, I think it was the New York Times, where someone wrote that she is very cautious and not mistake prone, doesn't make a lot of gaffes, and was sort of like, wait a second. She ended up saying that Curt Schilling was a Yankees fan, not a Red Sox former pitcher, and it's so easy to just kind of lapse into laziness, and not to pick on any one individual person, but I can't even remember who wrote that. I don't mean to pick on the person who wrote it, but it was a reminder to me that it's very easy to fall into that, and so I think the most important thing is to work hard.
How do you think of the tough questions?
How do you think of them? I think you have to stay on top of everything the president says, whether it's in an interview with your outlet or another outlet, everything he says in his speeches, and be watching for when he's shifting from something he had promised a month ago, a year ago, year and a half ago, and just constantly staying on top of what's happening inside this building, but also getting outside this building. Whether you're traveling with the president or jumping ahead of his travels to talk to actual voters, before and say, what are you thinking about the job he's doing? Because I think also sometimes we talk to ourselves a little too much about, well, this is what a senior official says. This is what some pundit's saying, actually getting out there. And John King is a good model for that at CNN because, especially as anchor of State of the Union, he's been getting out. He went to all 50 states last year and actually talked to, sort of a revolutionary thing to actually talk to voters.
That actually kind of leads into my next question. To what degree do you think the opinion media influences the questions that are asked here in the briefings?
Well, I know that the opinion media, speaking for myself, I don't think the opinion media affects my questions very much. Depends on how you define opinion media, I guess. But if you're talking, say, about the more conservative blogs, more liberal blogs in particular, I read a lot of them to get ideas and say, well, what's, sort of heating up the blogs right now? I mean, what are, for example, liberal blogs really pressing the administration on? And I will sometimes get an idea and say, like, I'll give you one example, which is that I think it was Huffington Post was really staying on the AIG Treasury Secretary Geithner story and what they felt was sort of a lack of disclosure about the counterparty swaps and whatnot, and it hadn't been asked in this briefing, and I thought, this is something to press the White House on. So a couple weeks ago I asked about it, and that was an idea that mostly came from the fact that I felt like there were legitimate questions being raised in some of the opinion media, if you can call it that, again, depending on how you define, and I felt like it was a fair question, and got some answers on it, but most of the time I feel like you can't fall back on just what the left's saying, what the right's saying. You've got to try to push as hard as you can down the middle, I think. But
I was kind of thinking about last week. I think it was Chip was asking Robert about the idea that the president was, or I think Gibbs said, well, you guys used to say he was overexposed.
Yeah.
Chip said, well, it wasn't us, it was the pundits.
Right.
Things like that.
So the more the opinion me, I thought you were thinking more left and right. But if you're saying pundits, okay. Well, in terms of the pundits, I actually disagree with sort of the White House position on this. You know, I don't give opinion, but this is more analysis in terms of the White House saying, you know, that the media, quote unquote, said that the president was overexposed, and so that's a reason to not hold a press conference for several months. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at transcripts of every live shot I did. Did I ever do a live shot that said, you know, critics are saying he's overexposed? Sure, if the White House feels like that's lame and that you're hanging it on critics. But fact is, there were critics out there saying he was overexposed. But personally, as a reporter, I don't make a judgment about whether the president's overexposed or not. And if I ever did in a live shot, it was a mistake. Because my point is that it is the freedom of the president, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, man or woman, when they're eventually a female is elected one of these days soon. They have the ability to kind of control the message however they want. And if, in the case of healthcare, the president felt like it was good to go on ESPN or the cooking show or, you know, whatever it was, if they felt like that was getting their message out, they're entitled to it. And I feel like it's really not our place to say he's overexposed, he shouldn't be doing that. Those are choices he makes. Now, we can analyze it, though, after the fact as to whether, for example, on healthcare, did all of those interviews, did all of the appearances move the ball on healthcare? It appears that it kind of got stuck in place for a while there, and I think we can make some reasoned analysis about that. But it's really, I don't feel like, I think we've got to be really careful as there's sort of this proliferation of opinion media, as you called it, and sort of the back and forth that is, it's just sped up so quickly because of the internet that instantly after a briefing there's comment about was that question fair, unfair. I think you just got to be really careful about making judgments about what any White House is doing. It's more pressing them, getting information, letting others make kind of the opinion judgments. I think we got to stick down the middle regardless of the current environment.
What do you think about when people talk about a media bias? Do you feel there is a media bias, and what is it, and how do you respond to that?
I always have struggled with the notion that there's one media bias that, you know, defines the media. You know, that the entire media, mostly the charge has been that the entire media is liberal. Then in recent years, you know, a lot of liberal folks like Media Matters, I think when I was covering the Bush administration, felt like it was the opposite, that, you know, the press was way too soft on President Bush, didn't ask enough questions before the war in Iraq. And so bottom line for me is I think it's in the eye of the beholder, and I think that depending on who's in the White House, the other side is going to say that the media, you know, is not being tough enough, and, you know, you're not being tough enough on Obama now, you're much tougher on Bush. And I think that's what it gets back to the previous answer. If we are tough and fair to both sides, let the chips fall where they may. People are going to accuse individuals of bias, and there may be individuals with bias, but I think saying the entire media is liberal or conservative is hogwash. And I think, you know, you do your own job, be as fair and tough down the middle as possible, and let the chips fall where they may. Let people make their judgments, they'll make their judgments.
I know you're on Twitter. I'm not sure how long you've been on Twitter.
Ed Henry CNN, if you want to follow me.
That's right, yeah. Aside from tweeting things out, you know, putting out stories, what do you take away from Twitter? What do you get from it?
I think Twitter is fantastic in a number of ways. The immediacy of it, of getting something out there, is fantastic, but I will say that in and of itself, I think, is a hyped up part of it, because working at CNN, we have that ability. And we've got a 24-hour news network that, not just on television, but on the internet. Of course, CNN.com is a massive site that can pump out information quickly. And you've got to be really careful to not treat Twitter differently as a journalist and think that because you can just post it instantly, that you shouldn't have editors, or, you know, you can just put it out there, because a mistake on Twitter is just as important as a mistake on air. It's my name out there. It's just as importantly CNN's name attached to my account. And whether it's some people don't put their news organization in the handle on their Twitter handle. Nevertheless, even if you don't, people associate you with that organization. You represent more than just yourself. So I think you've got to be tough, fair, but accurate and careful, regardless of what medium you're using. And in terms of, to answer your question directly, I mean, I think the feedback is actually really helpful. I mean, I'll put things on Twitter, a little thought, a little nugget from a briefing or something behind the scenes, and instantly get people saying, dumb analysis, or interesting, hadn't thought of it that way. And it's just helpful for me to sort of get the kind of feedback you don't get when you do a live shot on television and the viewer's watching you but can't really directly tell you what they think. I think that's really helpful because we're not perfect, and I think that was one of the mistakes the media, broadly speaking, made for a long time, was thinking the people we cover make a lot of mistakes, but we're infallible. We're not perfect, and we should realize that. And Twitter is a tool that helps us realize that, keeps us honest a little bit, and that's good.
If you could ask one question of any person...
I hate these questions. One question of anyone living...
Anybody living.
Oh, gosh, living or dead. Oh, I hate this question.
Yeah,
let me come back to it. I hate those kinds of questions. I don't know why. It's just like this bias I have. I can't, talking about media bias, I can't, the whole, like, who would you interview, what would you ask them, living or dead, I can't. My producer, Sean, is here. She might come up with something for me. She's thinking. I'll think.
I have two more questions.
Okay.
Go back to it. What did you think of the iPad?
It was unveiled on the same day as the State of the Union, so I didn't get to look closely at the iPad. I certainly, don't do product endorsements, but I got an Amazon Kindle last year, and on presidential trips, it's terrific because we used to carry around, briefcases with a couple of books for an week-long trip or something, magazines, newspapers. I now get the New York Times on the Kindle, read it there. It's neat, clean, environmentally friendly, all that. I read books on there. Reading Byron Pitts' book right now, CBS News correspondent, fascinating book about his life. So I'm open to the idea of the Apple iPad, but it's sort of, I've got right now in my pocket an iPhone, I've got a BlackBerry, and then I've got the Kindle. I've got two different laptops, a personal one and a work one, and I'm at my limit. So it's like if I'm going to do the iPad eventually, I'm going to let it play out because usually the second or third version is better of any of these things, like iPhone or whatever. I never get it in the first few days, first few months or whatever. I never wait in line for that. You may do that, but if I'm going to get it, I'm going to have to combine. I'm going to have to consolidate, like the president said in the State of the Union about some of these federal programs. I'm going to have to lose the Kindle if I do that, or I'm going to have to combine the BlackBerry and the iPhone and finally do my email on the iPhone. So there's probably more than you need to know, but I'm at my limit right now on devices. I'm open to it, but...
all right, last question, and then we can go back to the other one.
You're going to get me on that question.
What is your favorite guilty pleasure TV show? Something you watch that you might not want people to know you watch?
Oh, all right. So it's something I don't want people to know that I watch, but now you want me to tell them. Yeah, Entourage is just terrific. I mean, it's just different than anything else on TV, I think. I was into Mad Men the first season, and I have to admit that I don't want to, I don't want to lie. Second and third season, I kind of lost interest, and so I've lost it. I'm starting to watch old episodes of The Office because a lot of friends are into it, and I hadn't really watched the first one. Going back, and it's good. But if I had to pick one, I was going to say I'd pick Entourage. It's definitely at the top, but the second one, really close, is Curb Your Enthusiasm, because there are some episodes that are just hysterical.
Hold on, is it like something you're ashamed to watch?
There might be one or two others that I'm not telling you, but no, I'm actually not really into the reality show, so I don't watch Biggest Loser. I don't watch Jersey Shore. I saw 3 minutes on Hulu the other day, just out of curiosity, like, what is this thing everybody's talking about? And I kind of, it didn't hold my interest. So I could go back to it at some point. I'm open to it, like the last question, but no, it's Entourage and Curb Your Enthusiasm.
And all right, so you want to take a shot at the one
Man, the one person, one question. Any ideas, Shauna? I'm trying to think here. Is there anyone that I'm just going to say I'm Catholic. If I could interview Pope Benedict, I think, I'd ask him about faith. I think, it's a question that we don't talk about faith quite as much when we're covering politics. And I would I think, ask him about faith in general, but I would want to press him about, he ends up kicking up controversies no matter where he goes. He seems on a lot of his travels, and some of his past ties have come up a lot. His trip to Israel became very controversial, comments he's made about Muslims. And I feel like if I'm going to ask tough questions of the president, I should also ask tough questions of the Pope. I'd really like to interview the Pope.
It will be grilling, huh?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to be careful about the grilling because it might sort of backfire on me down the road, I guess. There's sort of some questions here that I can't answer, long term, what it would mean. But no, in all seriousness, I think I would be fascinated. I remember reading many times about Tim Russert meeting Pope John Paul II. I never had the privilege of doing that, and I think he interviewed him as well, or set up an interview for the Today Show. I'd say Pope Benedict.
That's pretty much all I got. Thank you very much.
All right. Appreciate it, Tom.
I will email you guys.
Thanks, sir.
When it goes up.
All right, cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Are we going to hit?
Yes.